And you alluded earlier to your time when you were homeless, Joe, and I think it's a powerful part of your story because, you've been honest with me in the past by saying that back then you were living in a world of scarcity, whereas now you've kind of switched to that abundant mindset. I was wondering if you could just talk about, that mentality you had on the street and what changed things for you.
Well, that's a sad story. Let's tell a sad story. I was homeless for a short time in Dallas, Texas, way back in the late 1970s, and I was in poverty for 10 years when I was in Houston through most of the 1980s, and they were not fun times. The curious thing was, and I think this is what I want people to get, is I was doing all the right things. I was working on myself. I was reading the success literature of the time. There was no internet, but we had public libraries. When I was homeless, I basically lived in the public library in Dallas. And I read the Dewey Decimal 601 area of the library, which was all the success literature, psychology, pop psychology, philosophy, metaphysics, the Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Joseph Murphy, the classics, all of those. I was reading all of them. I was writing. Right? My desire was to be a writer. I wanted to write novels and plays, as I remember at that time. And I had this goal. I looked out into the world and I saw people suffering because I was suffering. And I wanted to alleviate it by writing things that were humorous or one-act comedies or things that I wanted to do. So I wasn't into alcoholism. I wasn't into drugs. I wasn't into some sort of self-abuse or self-destructive behavior. I was trying to do the right things. So why wasn't it working? And this is the big takeaway. Every one of us has a key operating unconscious belief. It is primarily responsible for what most of is happening in our lives. And for me, with all that suffering and homelessness and poverty, when I finally looked in the mirror in the most raw, blunt, honest, uncomfortable way, I realized I was creating it because I believed I needed to struggle to be a successful author. I had studied so many lives of people like Jack London, who deeply influenced me. He wrote The Call of the Wild and The Sea Wolf and Martin Eden and White Fang and 50 other some books. He had an adventurous, alcoholic, sad life, and he was dead by his own hand at the age of 40. Unconsciously, I adopted the belief that, well, if I want to be as great of a writer as Jack London, that I better have a soap opera kind of terrible, depressing life as a regular human. And I studied Ernest Hemingway, and I loved his books, Old Man and the Sea, and his tight, muscular writing. But I also looked at his life, and his life was alcoholic, miserable, abusive to other people, and he shot himself. He was a suicide. When I realized that I was modeling my life after the lives of self-destructive authors because I believed I needed to, I had a wake up. I moved from victimhood and I moved into empowerment. And I thought, wait a minute, there's got to be authors that I admire that are healthy, well-adjusted, balanced, that are prolific, productive creators. And if I can find those authors and model their life and their thinking, rather than the self-destructive Jack London and Ernest Hemingway, I would have a very different life. And I did. When I found people like Ray Bradbury, who I did get to meet at one point later, in many later years, and realized that here was a pretty healthy guy who's doing wonderful things. His hobby was gardening, and he's writing stories every morning. And so when I started to realize it was my belief that needed to be changed, and I slowly started to change it. I was by myself. There's no internet. Coaching was only little league coaching back then. We didn't have life coaches and the kind of bells and whistles and wonderful tools and services we have today. So I'm doing it on my own. And it is tough to change on your own. You can certainly do it. You can certainly do it. People do it all the time, but you accelerate it when you get some help. Back then, I was all by myself trying to unravel my own belief system. But to answer your question, Brian, it was because of unconscious beliefs that I was suffering. And I invite people to be honest with themselves about what they could be believing during this pandemic, because it's very easy to be a victim. It's very easy to feel like The world has you under its thumb, and you can be crushed at any moment because we don't know what this invisible threat is or when it's going to stop or how it's going to be healed or cured. It's easy to move into that. And what I and other people are trying to do is move us into empowerment. And that's what my new course, The New Awakening, is about. New books are about it. And it doesn't, I'm not trying to sell something. I am trying to sell something. I'm trying to sell an idea. I'm trying to sell a philosophy. I'm trying to sell a different way of living, a different way of viewing life, a different psychology, if you will, a different philosophy, if you will. And this one is more empowering. This one says, yeah, there are things out there that could kill us. It's always been that way. But we can survive this. We have to look at what our beliefs are about ourselves, about our deep wiring, that what is the unconscious belief that is driving us for the most part. And then we want to take on new beliefs that are more empowering, including beliefs like look for the good. It's always there. Look for the light. It's always there. Start thinking positive. You have a choice. And the more we can do that, the more we can make a difference individually and collectively.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are probably listening and they're saying, I don't see how I can see abundance out here. All I see is scarcity. Everything's locked down. People are not doing business. I'm losing my job. The economy's going into a recession. But I mean, honestly, I see abundance everywhere. I see an abundance of time to spend with my family. I see an abundance of opportunity to broadcast when everyone else is quitting. I see an abundance of cheap ad space on platforms to promote my products. I see an abundance of amazing people to talk to now via video call. And it's just a different way of looking at it. And I just decided right when this happened 4 weeks ago, I'm like, I am expanding, not contracting in this. Because I've been through 9/11, I've been through the '08 recession, and I know the knee-jerk reaction is to pull back and retract and contract and go into this scarcity mode. And I just thought I'm not going to play that. So I would implore everyone as an exercise to do a bunch of things we said today, but also look at what are those things that are abundant out there.
Well, I also have a reminder, and this is the reminder I've been giving to myself and to other people. The very first one is this too will pass. This too will pass. When we start thinking that 100 some years ago, wasn't it the Spanish plague or there was a Spanish virus?
True, yeah.
Millions were killed. And back then we didn't have Facebook. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have the online world, let alone online delivery, or order from Amazon. And Amazon has delivery people that just seem to be invincible. They're out all day long and every day, pretty much at my house, almost every day. We didn't have all of this. So this too will pass. Then we go back in history, my God, my grandparents, my parents, they were called the war. They were called the frickin' war. What most of us have been called to do is go home and sit on our couch and wait it out. We have this opportunity to create, to grow, to learn, to reflect, to, going back to the beginning of the call, to meditate. There are so many positive things we can do. And I do believe there is abundance. I think there's abundance waiting, and I think there's abundance we can create. But it's a matter of us calming down and realizing this too will pass. And then to quote biblical literature, I'm not a specialist on this, but I know the phrase, be not afraid, is in biblical literature at least 350 times. It would seem to me it's a message that's trying to be sent to us. Be not afraid. This too will pass.